the American dream. To his last breath, he'll always be a soldier.
Heard on great radio stations all across America. It's the National Defense with Randy Miller and Jerry Newberry.
The National Defense is made possible by Ford, Go Further, by the Home Depot, more saving, more doing, by ADT Security, more than just a line in the sand, by VSP. For more information on how VSP can help you with your corrective vision needs, visit their website at VSP.com. By Morgan Stanley. Discover how they can help you reach your long-term financial goals at morganstanley.com. By the Wounded Warrior Project, serving those who sacrificed for over 15 years. Find them online at woundedwarriorproject.org. And by Farmers Insurance. At Farmers, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Find an agent at farmers.com.
This is the National Defense, Randy Miller and Jerry Newberry. And Jerry, as always, our dedication.
Hey, this show's for you, the men and women serving in our military. It's for the millions of veterans out there, and it's for all their families. We're here for you. We love you. God bless you.
So, Jerry, welcome back.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
You've been out on the road.
Yeah.
See,
me and my motorhome.
Now, you know what? You can relate to the guy we're going to have on here.
Yeah.
Right? Charlie Daniels. So Charlie Daniels has been a friend of veterans forever.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the guy's been doing, and in fact, I think, did the VFW give Charlie Daniels an award?
Yeah, he performed,
at some point?
And he performed at, I think it was our convention. It was either our convention or our Washington conference.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, Charlie's been there and done that.
Yep.
You know, he's been under fire. And
Charlie's happy to be under fire, though, I think. He's one of those guys.
He's probably like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Journey Home Project is something that's very close to Charlie's heart, and his manager, David Corlew. And David joins us here in the National Defense. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys, and I trust you guys are well also.
Yeah, we're doing great. And, you know, I want to thank you guys just, you know, right off the top for what you have done for veterans. And continue to do. How long have you been the manager for Charlie Daniels?
Well, I have actually been with Charlie for 46 years.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Wow.
April 13th was my 46th anniversary. I've managed him since 1989, but I went to work for him in the old days in 73. Actually got hired in 72. He lost his dad. It postponed it, and I went to work for him in April. And you know, started out, you know, we were just young and wild, and we had two Chevrolet vans. Had one that hauled the band in and one that hauled the equipment in. And I ran into him at a rehearsal hall at actually a record store, and he was looking for somebody to drive that van, and I was 23 years old, and I'll take the job, and I've never looked back. You know, I've gotten to see the world. I've gotten to experience life in the shadows of Charlie Daniels. It's been wonderful.
What a great story,
man! That's a long time.
Well, and Charlie's 81 now, right?
He's 81. He'll be 82. He'll be 82 in October.
82.
He's still out there kicking ass.
Yeah, right. 82 years old.
Yeah, and we just talked about it this morning. We talked about we talk every morning because we both get up early, and we were talking about how long and how much is going on. There was always, I had this deep fear of what I was going to do after Charlie had his run and what I would do later on in life, and now I'm 68, and I'm thinking, what the hell are we doing?
What am I still doing out here on the road?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I bet you guys got some stories.
Oh, man, I'll bet.
Yeah, there's the stories, and then there's the stories. But
yeah,
it's
right.
been he's had such a wonderful and diverse career, and
yep.
and then for us to, gosh, we've been doing stuff for the military, you know, since the late 70s, early 80s, and Charlie was even doing stuff in the 60s for the veterans.
Huh.
I mean, I think his first trip was to Thule, Greenland, like in the 60s, and
wow.
there was like probably 150 vets up there, soldiers up there, and but Charlie has always wanted to go to the places that nobody else wanted to go. He turned. He would not take the trips to Hawaii, to Pearl Harbor, or places like that. We always ended up in Korea and just the hard places where nobody else really wanted to go, and so that we spent the whole '80s Cold War in the bases all over Europe and places. But when they knocked the trade towers down, Charlie was one of the first contract acts to go into combat zones, and so that really kicked things into high gear for us.
Well, and you guys have developed this thing called the Journey Home Project. David, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, what happened was that for the last 12, 15 years, we've, like I say, since 9/11, we've been raising money, and we've raised money for some wonderful foundations, for Sentinels of Freedom, for Task Force Dagger, with Special Forces families, and a few years back, there were some of the foundations that had hit a few bumps in the road, and some of the money wasn't getting to the right places, and so we decided if it was going to have Charlie's name on it, if we were going to raise the money, we're going to put Charlie's name on it. There were two things we wanted to accomplish. We want to make sure the money goes to the right place, and what we found out in the last 4 years is that we want to get the money. If you give me $5, I want to make sure I spend that $5 where you want me to, as long as it aligns with credibility and honor. We're going to get that $5 to the place you want it to, and so I think we allow our donors to follow their money and understand where it's going and see it work. And so that's what the Journey Home Project was all about, how we have control of it, how we keep overhead down, and that we all have great day jobs, so there's no payrolls or anything, and so the Journey Home Project turned into something that, again, full circle for me, being 68 years old, it's given me a whole new project to work on that I love, that I think is never ending. And so it's been great. We're very happy.
Well, yeah, that's right now today, and I'm sure you've noticed this, that there is hardly ever mention of our troops that are still deployed. Yeah. Except when there's a casualty, it'd be mentioned. Right. But it's like our troops and our veterans are sadly, all that's starting to fall off the map, and it shouldn't. And it's good to know you guys are still out there plugging away, and our veterans aren't being forgotten.
Well, there's a saying that, and it came up quite a few years ago, but that the United States military is at war and America's at the mall. And if from what I know and from the people that I work with, and we certainly work very close with all the different branches of the military, is that, and nobody's talking about it, but we've completely decimated ISIS. And there's a huge number of Special Forces groups that are deployed or over fighting every day for us, which means their families have fear, their families are struggling, and nobody wants to talk about that. Yeah, right. I saw a thing on the other day on the I actually retweeted it, but it said that there's 750,000 children that are separated from their parents and because they're deployed, and which is the case, and that's what Journey Home Project is. We think the families serve as much as the soldiers do, and part of our program is directed towards the families themselves.
What was that number again?
750,000.
750,000
kids that are separated from since that's been the focus lately on about kids being separated from parents.
Right.
Well, your foundation provides a broad range of various types of support, correct?
Yeah, we do. We do everything. We just presented 2 scholarships to 2 fifth group Special Forces families for college. But we also there's a wonderful foundation called A Soldier's Child, and a gentleman by the name of Darryl Mackin that has started it. It's been going for about 5 years now, 6 years. And he brings kids. He started out bringing kids to a camp in Nashville every summer for a week. And he had, there were birthday parties every day. It was for veterans' kids that never got to have birthday parties because their parents are deployed or for whatever reason. And so then he got into the kids that were suffering from broken homes because of deployment and because of war and because of PTS and things like that. And he told me just a month ago that now he's getting kids, which is like one of the saddest things I've ever heard. He's getting kids in his program now that have actually seen one of their parents take their own life.
Oh, no.
And so this guy has broadened this program to a yearly program, and he's got kids coming in and out of Nashville all the time, and he gives them a week in a camp area where they camp out and they play games and they get to just be kids. And so we are broad ranging. We just helped there was a ranger, retired ranger that was a single parent, just his house burnt down. He was a carpenter now by trade, so his kids didn't have clothes to go to school, and he didn't have tools to go to work. So, we like to consider ourselves a quick response team, for the lack of better words, and we were able to, get the guy $5,000 in his hand within 8 hours of the time his house burnt down.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's great.
We there's some big organizations that do great work, and that's wonderful. For us, we're kind of small and but mighty, and we like to see direct response. We like to see that gratification really quick happen. So we watch our money close, but we put it in the hands that it gets used in the proper fashion.
Well, you know what, Randy? Heaven's going to be a different place.
Yeah.
When Charlie and David pass, and I hope that's a long time from now, but it's going to be a different place.
Yeah.
Because you can bet Charlie's going to be up there.
Well, that'll be the new side of the volunteer jam.
Yeah, there you go.
The JourneyHomeProject.org is the place to go. And David, we love talking to you. We got to get Charlie on this program sometime.
You guys just give us a shout out when you want him, and I think Fridays are always designated for interviews and stuff. So we'll try to grab him any day you'll take him.
Yeah, and anyone who quotes Ricky Ricardo is good in my book.
Absolutely. David, thank you so much for the time, man. We really appreciate it. And thank you what you're doing for veterans.
Guys. And thank you for what you guys do. And we just keep moving forward.
Thanks, brother.
We'll be right back here on the National Defense. We'll be right back on the National Defense right after this word from Farmers Insurance. When you're dealing with life's ups and downs, it helps to know the ins and outs of insurance. Farmers Insurance has been sharing practical insurance knowledge for more than 89 years. At Farmers, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Find an agent at farmers.com.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Welcome back to the National Defense. It's Randy Miller, and time for another Morgan Stanley Money Brief. And here with us this week is Peter Perez, Senior Vice President and Wealth Advisor for Morgan Stanley. Pete, last week we talked about credit and the FICO credit score. Why don't we continue that discussion, but kind of give us a quick review, if you will.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So your FICO score is essentially a snapshot in time of your past willingness and ability to pay your bills.
Right.
So your FICO score is based on 5 factors. Paying your bills on time, that's 35%. How much money have you borrowed? That's 30% of your score. Then your average length of credit life, that's 15%
right.
of your score. The kind of credit you have, so think secured credit, let's say by a house or car, for example, versus unsecured credit like a credit card. That's another 10%. And then, of course, new credit or credit inquiries for new credit, that's the last 10%.
Huh. So things you can do to help improve your credit score: pay your bills on time, don't max out your credit cards, try not to open new credit cards too frequently, opt for the secured credit instead of unsecured credit, say credit card debt, and avoid those unnecessary credit inquiries.
Target.
Yeah.
Ceasefire, as we used to say in my tank crew.
Right.
Ceasefire. Generally speaking, credit cards are where people run into the most trouble.
Yeah, and why is it important, Pete, to maintain discipline when you're using credit and try to get that high credit score?
Man, that's a great question. The answer is access to credit and cost of credit.
Okay, access to credit, I understand, meaning that with good credit, more companies are willing to lend you money. What do you mean by cost of credit?
Great question. So let's start with the idea that no matter what you buy, there's a cost for it, right?
Yeah.
And well, borrowing money has a cost to it, too. And that cost is the interest you have to pay to the person or company who lent you the money.
Oh, yeah. Well, that makes sense. So the cost of money is the rate of interest you pay to borrow it.
Exactly. And if you think about the cost to borrow money, it should be based on the risk that the money won't be paid back, right?
Right.
So, for example, if you buy a house and you don't pay, the bank can take the house back, right?
Yep.
In other words, the loan is secured by the house.
Right.
But what happens if you buy dinner on a credit card and you don't pay your credit card bill? The bank can't come and take back the meal,
right,
so the credit card is unsecured, right?
And I think they beat you at certain restaurants. But I'm sure some of the listeners wonder why a home mortgage's interest rate is so much lower than a credit card. And it sounds like it has to do with the fact that one is secured and the other isn't.
Yes, exactly. And the other FICO score components as well, like paying your bills on time and how much you have borrowed, also come into account and have an even bigger impact. But I can't emphasize strongly enough to your listeners the importance of maintaining credit discipline and improving your credit score.
And why is that?
Well, the higher your credit score, not only the higher chance that you'll be able to borrow money, but the less you'll have to pay to borrow by way of lower interest rates, right?
Okay, so let me see if I understand this. So your ability to borrow as well as borrow that money as cheaply as possible are direct results of your personal credit score.
Roger.
Randy.
No, Roger. So your listeners should pay their bills on time and not take out too much credit. And that helps them avoid high-cost unsecured credit like credit cards, payday lenders, and the like.
Man, Pete, thank you for explaining this to me and our listeners.
As always, thanks for the privilege of sharing this with our troops.
Absolutely, man. We'll be back here next week with a brand new Morgan Stanley Money Brief with Pete Perez right here on the National Defense. Welcome back to the National Defense. It's Randy Miller, and General Alan Salisbury is with us here, the CEO and co-founder of the Code of Support Foundation, doing some great work for veterans. General, how are you?
I'm just great today.
Hey, now, you're a West Pointer.
Yes.
Can we just talk about West Point for just a second?
Absolutely.
What a tremendous, tremendous place. And it's just amazing that every time you turn around, when you see people doing something that is substantial in our communities, it generally leads back to West Point.
Well, they do have a culture of service, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, probably, long after having retired from the military.
30-year career in the Army, and your final assignment was the Commanding General of U.S. Army Information Systems Engineering Command. I'm just glad we have that.
Yeah, actually, that it doesn't totally exist by that same name anymore. A lot of the pieces of it have gone to other organizations, but it was for the first time that we pulled together hardware, software, and systems integration all under one roof, which simplified the problem of building big systems. And I had responsibility for basically all of the Army's major IT systems around the world, including the enterprise resource management systems, financial personnel, all of that, which were very strong background for what I've been doing with Code of Support Foundation.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about this new venture with Code of Support. And just for the people that may not know, what is the Code of Support Foundation?
Well, We are about 8 years old now, and we were founded on the principle of this thing called a code of support. It turns out our military since 1952, our service members have been bound by a thing called a code of conduct. A lot of that has to do with conduct as a prisoner of war and whatnot, but in the very first article of 6 articles in the code of conduct, every single member of the armed forces pledges that they're prepared to give their lives in our defense. What a profound commitment that is. I and some fellow retired military friends one time sitting around decided to say, in return for that commitment, what are we, the rest of Americans, the 99%, owe that few, less than 1% of Americans who make that commitment. And so we developed a thing called the Code of Support, a set of 6 simple articles. We call it 6 simple promises that we ask all Americans to make that kind of gives meaning to the words, support our troops. And so we started out with that as our kind of value statement. But I met up with Christy Kaufman, who is our executive director, at the very beginning of this, and she's really a co-founder because together we built on that as a way to really invite all Americans to give back to our troops, to serve in some way to help them share this responsibility of keeping America strong and free.
What a great idea.
So we found out that so many of our service members in the current generation, as they transition out of the military, are having serious difficulties. And so we decided, well, we have to drink our own bathwater. We say to Americans, get involved. So we as an organization said, we can do better as an organization in terms of providing material assistance to these men and women who have given so much for our country. So we started out with a thing called case coordination. And really, we built on a research study that was done by the Pew Research people some years ago that said about 70% of the then 2.5 million American men and women transitioning out of the military are doing reasonably well. They can take off the uniform, they're reintegrating into society, they're finding a job, and they're pretty much landing on their feet. Might have a hiccup or two, but they're handling it. That said, 30% are having serious difficulties. 30% of what's today closer to 2.8, 2.9 million, that's over 800,000 service members having significant difficulties reintegrating back into society and getting over all the hurdles that they need to and taking off that uniform. So we decided to establish a program that we call case coordination. It's like case management, but we take the serious cases of service members, veterans, and family members having real significant difficulties. Typically, when they come to us, they're in kind of a crisis. We do an intake process on them to find out just who they are, where they've been, what their service records are, and that's important because it determines what they're eligible for. And then we kind of do an assessment to say what are the needs, not just of the service member or veteran, but of the entire family, because if the veteran is hurting, you can bet that the spouse and kids are probably got some issues too. So it's a holistic approach that we take. Now, we hire veterans, and in some cases, caregivers who are recognized by the VA as taking care of a veteran. We hire those kinds of people to be our case coordinators because they understand the language, they've been there, they can develop a rapport with the client that we're trying to serve. They do this intake assessment. They determine what are the needs, and they determine based upon their service parameters and demographic data what they're eligible for. And then they are experts at reaching out into this morass of thousands of organizations that are out there ready to help if you can just connect with them. And we help them make that connection. We do the interface. We bring it all together and kind of serve, in my terminology as a former IT guy, we serve as a system integrator to pull all these resources together and provide a holistic, long-term solution to the needs of this family with the objective of getting them totally back on their feet. And then we do follow-ups afterwards of 3, 6, 9 months, a year later to make sure they're still getting along okay. So that's the big gut work that we do.
I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot there. We're talking to General Alan Salisbury from the Code of Support Foundation, and what you're trying to do is so important, and we talk about this all the time. And you touched on several different things that are absolutely spot on. Hiring veterans and their caregivers as the caseworkers or case managers.
Right.
Because, we've come to understand that veterans will open up to other veterans.
Exactly.
More so than anybody else.
They can quickly build a bond of trust.
Right. Absolutely. And what you guys are doing in terms of the family, I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations miss that point, that when the veteran is hurting, the chances are very good that it affects everybody in a family.
And, of course, we know that the number one resource, which is terrific, the Veterans Administration, is there to serve the veteran, but not the family members.
Yep. Now, is this in coordination with the VA, General?
Absolutely, yes. We get referrals regularly from the VA for those kinds of things that they don't do.
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about Patriot Link. This is the new thing that you guys are launching. And,
exactly.
And this is also, again, very, very common sense based. I mean, you're linking up all these veterans, caregivers, service members. How does that work?
Well, I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to talk about case coordination, because it's the logical extension of case coordination. I said my case coordinators, we call them veteran peer navigators or caregiver peer navigators, become kind of expert at where to reach out. But even they were having a real problem sometimes meeting specific needs and finding an organization that did it. And the most difficult aspect of it is finding the organization that our client qualifies for, because they have so many different eligibility criteria across these organizations. Many people have heard that there's over 40,000 nonprofits out there with service member, veterans, et cetera, and in their mission statement purporting to help them. And this is the good news of today's generation versus my generation, which is the Vietnam generation, when we didn't have that many resources to reach out to. But it's frankly so many that it's almost impossible to navigate.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you've got the VA, you've got DOD, you've got Department of Labor, which helps in employment. You've got Health and Human Services, which helps in some of the health, mental health and whatnot areas. So it's a morass out there for people to try to find their way through. And most of them go out and Google.
Right.
And they'll find organizations, and they'll make a lot of calls and find out, well, we don't do exactly that, and they can't give them any more help than that, or that, gee, we'd like to help you, but you don't quite qualify, and here's why you don't qualify. So very frustrating, especially if you're a veteran that's hurting or a family member that's in distress. So we decided to take on the mission of building a system that anybody could log into, and based upon their demographic data, their service record, and their needs, they could find quickly resources tailored to them, which they're guaranteed to qualify for.
Wow.
That's a huge undertaking, I will tell you. From our perspective, that 44 really got shrunk down to about 17,000. Turns out that every American Legion or VFW post, for most of the part, they're in there as an individual organization, but they're not quite the ones that we need for the kind of direct services that we want to provide. And more important than that, a lot of very wonderful organizations, I'll take Adopt a Platoon as an example, really are morale building.
Right. Right.
They send care packages to deployed troops. That's terrific. That's wonderful. God bless them for doing that. But when you're one of those veterans that's hurting and the family is hurting, you need a direct service, and we actually categorize those into about 20 different categories. And then the subcategories there to get even more specific. And that's what we're building a database of.
General, how many people, you talk about this morass of different organizations, how many people get into this and they get so overwhelmed and they get so many dead ends and you're not the perfect person for our organization that they just give up?
They do give up, and that's a real problem. And it, unfortunately, I'd have to say there's probably a linkage sometimes between that and the suicide rates of veterans. It's frustration that we just got to overcome, and I think we're making a huge step in doing this.
Okay, so how do people get onto Patriot Link? How do you get that information and get in the system?
Very, very simple. Patriot Link, all one word, Patriotlink.org. Anybody, literally anybody, can go onto that site and establish an account. We do ask that they set up an account. It's a free account for anybody that wants it. Now, we have some upgrades from free account that are for organizations and that we provide extra features for, and those do have a fee behind them. But basically, the average individual user, it's a totally free service.
Wow.
They go on there, and what they do is enter in their service record, what services they've been in. And it may be, in many cases, more than one service, as it turns out, where they've been deployed to, what their disability rating is. There's a whole number of factors that we have to collect information on that determine their eligibility. We do not ask them to enter personal information other than in establishing the account. But when they're doing a search, their name does not get associated with it. So if they're looking for mental health services, for instance, their name does not get associated with that search, and that's important to a lot of people. So privacy is a huge factor of what we're concerned with here. And then they enter in the needs that they have, and if they put in something like housing as one of, there's 20 categories that we catalog, then they'll be given some further refining subcategories that they can do. And when they hit search, they will come up with a list of, divided by national resources that serve people anywhere, regional resources that serve people in their region, and local resources that serve people in their local area.
Wow. I just want to thank you for letting us get the word out about Patriot Link, because that's something that every veteran should know about. We're talking to General Alan Salisbury, Chairman, CEO, and co-founder of the Dakota Support Foundation. General, thank you so much for the time. PatriotLink.org is where to go for all the information, and maybe we can have you back on again and give us a little update on how it's going.
I'd love to tell you some good news as we build up the number of users, and we have the exciting cases to report great results from.
That is great. General, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it very much, Randy.
We'll be right back with the National Defense right after this word from Farmers Insurance. When you're dealing with life's ups and downs, it helps to know the ins and outs of insurance. Farmers Insurance has been sharing practical insurance knowledge for more than 89 years. At Farmers, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Find an agent at farmers.com.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Welcome back to the National Defense. I'm Randy Miller, and it is time for a brand new edition of Eye Insights from VSP Vision Care. Dr. Tim Jankowski is back with us this week. Dr. Jankowski, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So it's almost time. I can't believe it. It's almost time for back to school, and when you're getting ready, getting all your things ready, the eyes sometimes are not thought of first. But they should be, especially with your kids. Why should an eye exam be on that back-to-school checklist?
Well, it's important to remember that 80% of everything that kids learn in school is learned visually. It comes through the eyes first before it's processed anyplace else.
Would you say 80%?
Oh, yes, 80%.
Wow.
It goes through the eyes first. So if the eyes aren't seeing clearly or they're not functioning properly together as a team, then the children are going to suffer in learning.
Yeah, I mean, and an eye exam should be every year for kids?
It absolutely is. If you see your children grow, how quickly they change, sometimes month by month, but certainly year by year, a yearly exam for children is an absolute must.
And what should you be looking out for in terms of your kids?
Well, common signals that your children may be experiencing some vision problems, including covering one eye or holding reading materials very close to the face, or a very short attention span where they can't read for long periods of time. They may also complain of headaches or other discomfort. But the bigger problem ends up being is that most children won't complain of things because they've accepted the problems that they're experiencing as their normals. So if they think it's normal, they're not going to think that there's a problem with it. So it's important to have their eyes checked every year just to make sure about those things.
They've just gotten used to that feeling, I guess, huh?
They've gotten used to it, and if they don't experience anything different, that's normal for them.
Yeah, right. Well, what can you do to help keep your child's eyes working well and feeling good and making sure they're at their optimum performance?
Well, it's important to prevent eye strain. The biggest problem that we're facing nowadays is exposure to what we call blue light, which is found in phones and tablets and computer screens and so forth. We do know there's a couple specific problems with exposure to blue light. One of them is that it can disrupt how well you sleep, and secondly is that there's some strong evidence that it may also be linked to the increase in nearsightedness that we're seeing around the country. Really?
You know what? I wondered about that because in limiting that exposure, especially for kids, has got to be the thing that you have to do, right? Well, it's a challenge because I don't know too many children that don't have a phone in their pocket and holding it 6 inches from their eyes. But it's important to limit it, particularly before you go to bed, at least a couple hours, 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed. Ideally, no blue light exposure at all. So when you're talking about back to school, if you have a child that plans to play a sport when they get to school, any kind of specific things you need to prepare for with that? Well, it's important to wear proper eye protection for sports and a lot of outdoor activities. Protective eyewear and quality sunglasses that offer ultraviolet light protection are critical in maintaining visual skills for sports and preventing injuries, too. That's the one thing I think the sports departments in schools have really stepped it up in terms of healthcare overall. But I think, eye care and concussion and those kind of things, I think they've really have added a lot more attention to those things, and that's a good thing. Yes. So, Doctor, now how can VSP help ensure that our eyes stay healthy this coming year? Well, VSP is currently a vision carrier for hundreds of thousands of federal employees through the Federal Dental and Vision Insurance Program. And there's great news coming up because certain retired members of the uniformed services and their families, as well as most family members of active duty servicemen and women, will be offered vision care beginning in January of 2019. In order to read more about it, to learn more about it, go ahead and visit tricare.benefeds.com. Yeah, that's tricare.benefeds.com, and you can find out all about it. It's coming. It's going to be here before you know it, so check it out. Dr. Jankowski, thank you so much. We'll be back here next week with a brand new edition of Eye Insights from VSP Vision Care right here in the National Defense.